to line him up with a TikTok with Belinda later on. Thank you, Dan. 29 days to the election and the Prime Minister is calling on one of Australia's most popular Prime Ministers to join his campaign. John Howard will today hit the trail in his old seat of Bennelong. And the Prime Minister needs the assist facing growing criticism over the national security failings on the Solomon Island and reports that cost of living will rise again during the campaign. Joining me to discuss this and more is Josh Frydenberg, the Treasurer in Melbourne. Treasurer, good morning to you. Welcome to Weekend Today. Rolling out John Howard, is that enough to win over undecided voters?
You can't hold John Howard back. He loves hopping on the campaign trail. He's very effective when he does so, and as you know, the Australian people have great affinity for him as being Australia's second longest serving Prime Minister. Both Scott Morrison and I talk regularly to John Howard. He's a source of wise counsel. And he's a great Liberal and a great Australian.
He also represents an era of stability we haven't had for a while. What's he telling you about this campaign?
Well, obviously, cost of living is a major issue. National security is a major issue, and he was very complimentary about the measures that we had in the budget, which we outlined as part of our broader economic plan just over 2 weeks ago. He supports the measures that we've got to increase investment by small business in their workforce, in technology. He supports what we're doing through the regions as the new frontiers of economic growth. The investment in manufacturing is really important for Australia as we build greater supply chain resilience, particularly, Charles, in light of the greater threats globally in Ukraine and indeed with the pandemic. So we're on the same page when it comes to the economic priorities of Australia. And of course, the one thing that John Howard and we are both very proud of is the fact that the unemployment rate today at 4% is the equal lowest in 48 years, even after what has been the biggest economic shock since the Great Depression.
The unemployment rate is certainly welcome, but cost of living is again expected to rise. This is mid-campaign. Now, given wages aren't going to rise mid-campaign, can you admit now it's going to get harder to make ends meet for people than before it gets easier?
Well, cost of living is very real. It's the #1 discussion topic around Australian kitchen tables, and that's why we took a decision in the budget to halve the fuel excise, which has seen the price of petrol come down significantly since the budget.
That's only for 6 months, though, Treasurer. There is a long way to go before we start seeing long-term benefits with wages.
Well, we actually upgraded our wages forecast each year in the budget. And we're expecting inflation, while to be a little higher this year, then to come down after that. We've also provided measures to ensure that medicines are more affordable and accessible for Australians. We've also provided a $420 increase to the low and middle income tax offset, which will benefit 10 million Australians. That will be in their pay packets when they get their when they put in their tax return after the 1st of July. And then we're going to be seeing 6 million pensioners, veterans, carers and others on income support get a $250 payment from the government in coming weeks. So we do recognise that cost of living pressures are real. That's why we've taken steps across the board to try to alleviate some of those pressures.
The reason I ask this, and because we have former leaders coming back out, you're a student of politics and conservative politics. You'll know in 1980 Ronald Reagan asked, are you better off than you were 4 years ago? So I ask you, are Australians better off today than they were 3 years ago?
Well, certainly the unemployment rate is lower. Economic growth is growing, is getting higher, and we are going to see wages growth as well. But the thing that we have delivered over the last 3 years is $40 billion of tax relief, which is into the pockets of Australians. So I recognise, Charles, that there are real challenges for Australian families out there. We have to also acknowledge that we've just been through the biggest economic shock since the Great Depression, and we saw Treasury fear that the unemployment rate could reach as high as 15%. It's now 4%.
This is the same Treasury that's forecasting that wages will rise, so how much value can we put in that?
Well, when we forecast wages in last year, actually was higher than what was forecast in reality. So I think Treasury do a very good job, but of course these are pretty uncertain economic times. But you know that the coalition will deliver lower taxes, will create more jobs, has the economic plan for the future, and that's very much in stark contrast to Anthony Albanese, who's never held a Treasury portfolio, never delivered a budget, has always championed higher taxes, and hasn't outlined a viable economic plan.
Bob Hawke never held a Treasury portfolio and came in and developed the modern economy, so that's not a prerequisite to being a Prime Minister. The Liberal Party are campaigning saying it won't be easy under Albanese. Is it easy now?
Well, there are challenges right now.
Yeah, but the question, is it easy now?
Is that the economy is strengthening. No one would say it's easy now. What I'm saying is that right now it's challenging for many Australians, but I also know that the coalition provides a great deal of stability and strength. And when you come to, and you raised Bob Hawke, Charles, so let me respond on that. Anthony Albanese was arguing against Bob Hawke and Paul Keating's economic reforms. This is a guy who has actually argued in favour of death duties and supported a carbon tax and a mining tax, and just 3 years ago said Labor had a strong mandate for higher taxes on superannuation, higher taxes on incomes, higher taxes on family businesses, higher taxes on housing and higher taxes on retirees. That's his track record. And he's tried to sneak into government by being a small target. He got found out in the first week of the campaign on the cash rate and on the unemployment rate. Now it's up to him to actually lay out his economic plan, because so far Australians haven't seen one.
US officials have met with the Solomon Islands PM, warning they'd respond accordingly if China established a permanent military presence. That's much stronger language than we've got from our government.
Well, we're very concerned about these growing ties between China and the Solomon Islands, but the real story today is that the alternative Deputy Prime Minister and the person much speculated to be a Defence Minister in a Labor, if Labor was successful, Richard Marles, was providing a speech to the Chinese embassy before he delivered a speech in which he said he was encouraging China's active involvement in the Pacific, welcoming their additional financial contributions in the Pacific, and dismissing any strategic concerns. That's a real worry. Richard Marles needs to come out of hiding to explain his position in front of the press pack, because we won't take a lecture, Charles, from the Labor Party when it comes to national security and defence, when defence spending under them fell to its lowest level since 1938 at just 1.56% of GDP. We've lifted it to 2% and rising. And in the budget, I announced major initiatives like a 10-year, $10 billion cyber security preparedness strategy.
Treasurer, we always appreciate your time, particularly in the middle of an election and with a big Carlton game tonight. So thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Charles. All the best to you.